everyone, and welcome back to Health Horizons, where we talk about the most important health issues shaping our world today. I'm Luisa, and today we're diving into something that affects all of us: the rise of drug-resistant diseases. How are these diseases evolving to resist new medicines, and what we can do about it? Joining me is this in this discussion is my co-host Sebastian. So thank you so much for being here, Sebastian.
Thank you to you, Lisa, for inviting me, and it's great to be here. I think that this is a topic that's becoming more and more urgent, so I'm excited to discuss this with you. Don't you think so?
Yes, absolutely. It's an issue that's been growing silently for years,
Yeah,
and now it's starting to get more attention it deserves. So, Sebastian, I would like to start with the basics. So, I think that we hear a lot about bacteria and viruses becoming resistant to medicine. So, can you please explain exactly how that happens?
sure. Just for giving an example, when a bacterial or viruses are exposed to a treatment, right, like
Mhm.
antibiotics or antivirals, most of them are killed, but some survive. That's something that often happens due to a genetic mutation. They can multiply and pass on their resistance. Over the time, the more they are exposed to the same treatments, the more resistant they become. It's like natural selection for microbes.
Okay, so and those are the okay. So one of the biggest problems actually is that we have been overusing antibiotics, right? Like both
Yeah,
in humans and in agriculture.
exactly. We are not going to just be in the field of humans. We're gonna move to the agriculture because in many cases people take antibiotics when they don't need them. Like for viral infections with antibiotics don't even treat them. But on the other hand, in agriculture, antibiotics are often used to prevent diseases in livestock rather than just treating sick animals. So this overexposure allows bacteria to evolve faster as more than we are imagining.
Yeah, that's so true. So I think it's not just antibiotics. We are seeing viruses like the flu and COVID-19 mutate rapidly too. I have read about that the flu virus changes so frequently that we have to create a new vaccine every year to keep it up with it.
That's right. That's a big main point because if we take a look about what happened with the COVID-19,
Mhm.
we have the original strain, and then variants like Delta and Omicron emerged. Each one slightly and more resistant to the vaccines that we were developing. Luckily, the vaccine still works to some extent, but the virus is always one step ahead, constantly adapted. That's
That's
something that
so, yes, that's true. So I think which brings up a real world issue is the MRSA, or known as medicine resistant. So this is like an infection that's become resistant to many antibiotics. So many hospitals around the world are struggling with this, and it's particularly dangerous because it can spread quickly in healthcare settings.
Yeah, that's a big problem because MRSA is one of the most well known as superbugs, but it's not just for hospitals as most of the people can think because we're seeing an antibiotic resistant even in common infections like urinary tract infections, which it used to be easy to treat with the standard antibiotics, but nowadays in some parts of the world the same infections are resistant to nearly and all available treatments that a hospital or a houses have.
Yes, and what you say about the tuberculosis? I have heard that the drug-resistant strains are making it harder to control. That's so
Yeah,
crazy.
that's crazy, and that's something that we can spot about the tuberculosis because the multi-drug resistant is another major issue because the tuberculosis have been a global health threat for centuries, but now we're facing strains that don't respond to the two most powerful anti-tuberculosis drugs that exist, that is the rifampicin and isoniazid. This makes the treatment much longer and more expensive, and in some cases, can be almost impossible.
Wow. So it's shocking how widespread this issue is. And what's scary is that we are running out of options. So developing new antibiotics takes a lot of years. And as you said earlier, a bacteria evolves so quickly.
Yeah, the bacteria are always evolving. So if we take that into a discussion, it's a huge problem because
Yes.
pharmaceutical companies are investigating as much in antibiotic development as we ever know. But in sometimes it's expensive and antibiotics aren't as profitable as doing for chronic conditions like diabetes or heart diseases, since people usually only take them for a short period of time.
So it's not just like a scientist challenge, it's also an economic one, right?
Absolutely. We're not talking about the word of the scientist. It is also the economic one is playing a role in this situation. But there are other factors that are playing, like the global travel and overpopulation, right? Why
Mm-hmm.
do I mention this? Because diseases spread faster than ever before. And when we have an urbanization, it means more people living in close quarters, which helps infections to spread. There is an example of how people live in Japan. They live in close spaces and among one of another.
Wow, that's crazy. So I think that another thing to consider is climate change too. I have read that as temperatures rise, diseases that were once limited to certain regions, like for example malaria or dengue fever,
Yeah,
are spreading to new areas. So the medicines we have might not work as well in those new environments.
of course, the climate change is definitely playing a role. The warmer the climate get, this allows a center of vectors like mosquitoes that they thrive in areas where they previously couldn't, bringing diseases with them. With every shift that we can experiment in the environment, we are facing the potential for diseases to adapt in ways we haven't predicted before.
Wow. So, do you have any information like about what's been doing about it? So, is there like, or are there any promising development in fighting resistant diseases?
Yeah, it could be, and one of the most important proposals are the this working that have been developing in this phage therapy because this is amazing. This is bacteriographies, viruses that are viruses that infect and kill bacteria, but this is still in an experimental stage. But in some specific cases, it works when antibiotics have failed. Researchers are looking to use CRISPR, that is a laboratory instrument that is used to change or let's call edit piece of cell's DNA. Another way to solve this situation is the gene editing technology that targets to resistant bacteria at the genetic level.
Okay, so and I have heard of antimicrobial peptides too. So proteins that the immune system produces naturally, which could be turned into new drugs.
Yeah, those ones are promising as well, but the idea is to find as many ways as possible to either strengthen our own immune response or attack bacteria and viruses differently than the traditional antibiotics that we have been using in all of these years before. But again, as we were mentioned, it takes time to develop this kind of treatments. That is the major point that we are facing.
Yeah, and actually, I think we saw that example when they developed the COVID vaccine, right? It takes
Right.
like 2 years after the pandemic.
Happened. Yeah.
Yeah. So Sebastian, it's clear that this is one of the biggest challenges in modern medicine. To sum up, we have talked about how bacteria and viruses are involved into resist treatment. So, the dangers of drug-resistant infections like MRSA and tuberculosis, and also the factors that are making the problem worse, from overuse of antibiotics to climate change.
Yes, and the main takeaway, I think so, if we can call it that way, is that this is a global issue that is going to require a lot of cooperation. Not only cooperation of you and me, it comes from scientists, policymakers, and everyday people. Yeah, because what we need to do is to push for better practices in medicine, agriculture, and even in how we treat this kind of infections, right?
That's true, and I would like to add too that something that it's really important. I think education plays a huge role too. So people need to understand like the importance of using antibiotics responsibly, following vaccination guidelines, and doing what they can do to prevent the spread of infection in the first place, like we do when we were in COVID-19, as we used to use the mask and wash our hands and use that
All of
kind
it.
of things. Mhm.
Yeah, the use of
Yes.
alcohol. Well, and while there are new treatments on the horizon, of course, like the ones that we mentioned before, the phage therapy and the gene edit, as we mentioned, it's going to take time to see them fully implemented. But I think that that could be a real situation that we will be facing in our future. Well, for
Uh,
this time, what we can do is to work with the prevention and the awareness about the infections that are around in our context, because this is the key about how can we face these kind of problems.
yeah, that's really important. So, well, thank you so much, Sebastian, for sharing your insights today. It's been a great discussion, and I hope our listeners are more informed about the risk and challenges of involving diseases. And
Thank, thanks to you, it was great to talk about this topic because it's kind of problematic, but it's necessary. And I
that's
hope
correct.
it helps to our learners to raise the awareness of how serious this issue is for us.
Absolutely. Yeah, so thank you so much to everyone for tuning in. Stay safe, stay healthy, and we'll see you next time on Help Artisans. This is Lisa and Sebastian signing off.
See you.